Next up, because chat is demanding I do this live, we're going to be checking out perfectly recreating Egyptian mummification to taste it from Thought Emporium. Yep, we're doing this. I don't have a barf bag. I feel I should probably need one. Oh, God.
Oh, my breath smells of mummy.
What does Egyptian mummy taste like? I know, we ask the really hard-hitting questions on this channel, but this question actually used to be really easy to answer. As late as the 1800s, and for a period of at least 600 or 700 years before then.
Oh yeah, people did this. They would actually get mummified objects and then eat them because they thought it had some like mystical property. I forgot all about that. It's so disturbing.
The answer could be found by just going to your local pharmacy, or whatever witch hut or apothecary passed for one at the time. During that period, a tincture of mummia, the blackish resin chunks found on Egyptian mummies, was used as a cure-all for everything from headaches to stomach aches and pretty much anything else the doctor could sell it to you for.
Yeah, there's a reason, up until within the last 100 years, seeing a doctor and jumping off a building were both options you would have to choose. Yeah, that's not a joke. Prior to anesthetics, that was actually very common. Hell, prior to some antibiotics, it was very common for people to decide pavement diving was preferable.
Including as an aphrodisiac. And all because of a bad translation of an ancient scroll, though we're going to come back to that in a moment. When I first learned about this, my immediate question was, I mean, is it better tasting than Buckley's? It probably...
I have no idea what Buckley's is, but I'm assuming it's cough syrup.
Works about as well. And also, what does mummy actually taste like? But these days, breaking a chunk off a mummy to have a taste is generally frowned upon, so the answer is harder to come by.
Night at the museum.
Great jerky. My God, this is an outrage. I was going to eat that mummy.
So as we sat pondering this truly important question, it occurred to us that there was only one thing to do to find out. Break into a museum and steal a mummy. But when we realized that we just didn't have the outfits for the occasion, we decided to go with the next most logical thing, and instead just make one ourselves. Inside this sarcophagus is the actual mummy of Hennefer I, the illustrious chicken pharaoh of Greater Canada.
That's why everyone was talking about the chicken pharaoh. Oh... On the upside, it's a chicken. If they were doing this to something else, like a cat because tradition, or a person, I would have questions and probably throw up faster.
Recently deceased and recovered from the Asian grocery store we bought them from. While their origins may be humble, as far as we know, this is the most accurate recreation of the Egyptian mummification process that has been conducted in thousands of years, and we spent the better part of 8 months making it, and we may have gone a little bit overboard. In order to do this, we had to talk with Egyptologists, learn a sizable amount of ancient Egyptian, translate the wall of an ancient temple, source herbs and resins from all over the world, reverse engineer the various ointments, all from mass spec data of both actual mummies and a brand new archaeological find.
Okay, I thought this was going to be a dumb gimmick, but no, they're actually putting in work on this. So I'm assuming this entire channel shtick is, here's a dumb thought that no one should actually take seriously. Let's put in legitimate research to make it work. That's fascinating and terrifying in equal measure.
And then we had to figure out from both ancient sources and modern recreation attempts how to execute all the steps properly. On top of that, we created a huge collection of grave goods, our own embalming tools, canopic jars, amulets, and the beautiful sarcophagus covered in actual spells from the Book of the Dead. Just the incense that we burned during the process is made of 17 ingredients and takes a month to make.
Oh God, they actually made the incense. Oh dear God, some of these are actually pretty expensive, I think. Pine resin, yeah. Can't read some of that. Myrrh, I think, has actually gone up in price.
Just to give you a sense of how deep down this rabbit hole we went. And now I have an extensive collection of herbs, resins, and spices that would make even the most dedicated herbalist blush.
Yeah.
Though I am pleased to report that even after all of this, none of us have been haunted by any ancient curses, so we take it to mean that we've done it correctly.
Funny thing is, about the curse thing, well, that was a belief, never stopped any grave robbers, but also a lot of the times when people got sick entering ancient tombs, it's because of stale air. Yeah, if you leave it in there long enough, the bacteria will eat up what's in there, and then what's left is not survivable. And if it's far enough down, when you just open it, it's not really going to be a good airflow. So there was legitimately a thing where people will get sick and sometimes have other symptoms because of that. And that's not even taking into account that there would be other types of viruses in there from previous times where it would just have tons of bacteria and virus and experimental, well, unintentionally experimental shit. It's like, hey, what would happen if someone knew who had different biology because of just slow bits of drift and different bacteria protecting them and engaged with them, suddenly exposed to things that they previously did but no longer have anymore? Science. Was it treated that way intentionally? No, but that's the best kind.
But before we get into making our mummy, why were people eating them in the first place?
Freaky
As
stuff.
I said, it was because of a bad translation. The Egyptian word for mummy wasn't mummy, it was actually sa'af. However, in the region, there was a black tarry petroleum product called mummia that had been used for centuries, the same way that we use products like Vaseline today. It makes a great sealant for wounds and was sometimes consumed as a tincture. Though, like all petroleum sources, the supply of mummia eventually dried up. And then, when Latin translators in the 12th century were trying to explain to people what mummia was and that they'd like to buy some, it got confused with the black resin found on mummies.
So it's not even that it was a bad translation. It was someone in Egypt going, they want to buy what from the dead people? They want to literally, no, not the grave goods, but the actual piece of the dead person? Neat.
Think about it. If the only description you had to go on was a black resin found in the ground with healing properties, you can see that it might be possible to mix that up with a black resin you found in the ground that happens to be encasing a weirdly well-preserved body.
Or, and let's be completely upfront about this, it could have been, so we can literally sell these people dead shit. Like, we can literally sell them a corpse and they'll buy it. Look at these idiots. We're selling them dead shit and they don't even, yeah. There's someone out there who knows it's wrong and they did it because they're still buying it.
And in a special decorated magic box. Maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but Google didn't exist back then and mistakes can happen. But that mistake led to an absolute shitload of cannibalism. So, better to maybe double check these things in the future. And with all that trade, tens of thousands or potentially millions of mummies were dug up, chopped up, and sold for parts.
And I'm sure there was plenty of times where it's like, hey, Frank's a bad employee. Sell him. I'm sure that never happened, though.
It was such a common practice that it was mentioned by Shakespeare, and it was those body parts that became the source of a really gross pigment, aptly called mummy brown, that many artists used to swear by. Remember, mummies are only rare because people ate them.
I did not know that's how mummies became rare. I thought they were just desecrated tombs because they stole the shit and left the bodies out to be consumed by the sand. I didn't realize it's because people ate them. That part I was unaware of. Oh, joy.
And while this whole introduction may seem utterly revolting, and I mean, yeah, it is, you need to keep in mind that these bodies they were digging out of the ground weren't stinking corpses. On top of being weirdly well preserved, they were reported to smell awesome. To the ancient Egyptians, smelling good was to be close to God, and
oh yeah, because wasn't honey one of the parts? Oh yeah.
Bad smells were associated with evil and darkness. So the process of mummification evolved over thousands of years to take a corpse which would otherwise rot and stink very quickly in the hot desert, and instead preserve it as quickly and efficiently as possible, while also making it smell as good as possible. And even ancient mummies were said to still smell faintly of spices or cinnamon even thousands of years later.
Damn.
So how do we make a mummy? Well,
I mean, speaking from going to previous cons, you can't even do that after 3 days. If you know, take a shower.
Let's consult the assembly instructions. As
She
you can
wrote
see,
the
there's a few
instructions.
things we need to prepare in advance.
The best part is, this is legitimately good instructions for people if they're trying to learn anything about Egyptology at this point. That's kind of awesome.
First is, of course, the body. As I mentioned earlier, we're using a chicken from the grocery store, which means we won't have to remove the organs as that's already done. That's probably for the best, as this video already has a lot of bodies and corpses, and the demonetization robot is probably already having a fit.
Oh, yeah.
As such, our instructions
It's for
reflect
science.
that and assume an empty body. Also, we won't need to remove the brain, as the Egyptians would leave it in for anything smaller than a sheep.
Oh.
It was removed primarily for considerations of rot, but if the animal is small enough, it'll dry fine and not cause issues.
Oh, that's why they did
For
it.
that drying, we need an enormous quantity of a mineral called natron. This is a special salt
What's
that will be
nat-
used to both fill and bury the body in to suck all the moisture out of it. We ended up needing over...
How much would they need for an actual full human body then? So that's actually, yeah, one of the ways you preserve meat is jerking it in salt. And I guess if you're presuming a natron, which is the type of salt, then that would literally be human jerky. Science.
60 pounds just for this small bird. We'll also need a variety of different ointments, oils, herbs, spices, and infusions to treat the body at the various stages, as well as a special glue to affix the bandages at the end.
Is it edible glue?
Unlike in the movies, where the bandages look like they're just wrapping toilet paper around a corpse, real mummy bandages are heavily glued on, practically encasing the body in an airtight glue linen composite. And speaking of which, we'll need a ton of linen for various parts of the process as well. The main resource we used when designing our process was the past work of two groups who've attempted to make mummies before. The first comes from the olden days of 1997 and was the first attempt at
Olden days of 1997. A previous millennia. Wow. I just need to bring out my cane and tell all these young whippersnappers to get off my lawn because, oh dear God, man, it's just, we're talking about it's like ancient Egypt and old 90s. It's just, just slapping me right in the face, man.
at complete human mummification, replicating the original process.
With volunteers,
However, it
who
being
definitely
the
asked.
90s, the quality of digitizing methods means that all of the images from the paper, and those shown during a talk the lead researcher gave, were incredibly blurry or looked like
I mean, also the camera sucked.
photocopies of photocopies. But it did contain a wealth of information on the mechanics of the process.
Also, let's be completely honest. It probably wasn't looking like it was a photocopy of the photocopy. It probably was a photocopy of a photocopy put into the book because it was a photocopy of that as well. So many times.
The other group was led by a researcher named Dr. Salima Ikram. She's a specialist in animal mummies and wrote several
That was a lot of alligator mummies. Wow.
papers about her attempts at the process, and she was kind enough to send them to us when we contacted her. Of the various papers she wrote, probably the most detailed was her team's attempt at mummifying a sheep, titled From Meadow to Embalming Table, which might
I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to laugh. They're not going to get me with the freaking paper title.
be the cutest paper title I've ever seen in my life. But in her earlier work, she also mummified a rabbit, a cat, and some fish as well.
The cat's probably
Alright,
very
let's get started by preparing
A
our
fish. I guess it wouldn't be saltwater fish for the Egypt, yeah.
natron. Normally, this is a mineral that was mined in the Natron Valley and is leftover residue from dried up lake beds.
Lake
It
bed,
was not
really?
only used in mummification, but as an everyday cleaning product as well.
Yeah.
And without realizing it, you've used the modern equivalent, because the chemical composition of natron is about 84% sodium carbonate, also known as washing soda, 14% sodium
Wait, washing soda's a thing? Well, I've been doing that wrong.
bicarbonate, also known as baking soda, and 2% sodium chloride, also known as table salt. So to make our natron, we just have to mix those things in those proportions. We repeatedly
Lot of
added
dust.
small amounts of each, cycling through the various ingredients while mixing to make sure the blend was homogeneous. And this was our first hint at just how unbelievably labor-intensive this process was going to be. With our natron prepared, we can work on the body. Normally, there would be organs inside that needed to be tended to, and this brings us to the topic of canopic jars. Here's the set that we made for our mummy, but you may be surprised to find that a lot of the time there were no organs in these.
Really?
Originally, the organs would be removed and dried in natron with the rest of the body before being put into jars. And the exact number of jars and the depiction of the gods on the lids changed a lot over time. In fact, originally they literally were just jars with very little ornamentation.
Oh, that makes sense, because as the pyramids grew, as the traditions grew, as you're trying to show more proof that I matter, you probably make it look nicer as well, because you can, and you don't want it to look as plain as the guy before you.
But as history stretched on, a new process was developed. Rather than carefully removing the organs, cedar oil was just pumped into the corpse via their butt, and then they were plugged up like a bottle of champagne.
Oh.
Once the bottle had been dried in the
I was unaware of that. I was talking more about how the jars got more delicate, but they literally just made people balloons. There's a people water balloons that they salted. Or I guess oil balloons.
natron, the internals will have liquefied and could literally just be drained away. Again, much like a bottle of champagne. But the tradition of canopic jars stuck around, so eventually they became not even hollow jars, but rather just votive statues. Since we're using a gutless bird, we're going to be using the jars in that spirit. We went with the 4 classic sons of Horus for our lids: Duamutef, Kebesenuf, Imseti, and Happy. So with no organs to deal with, we can just start by directly washing the body. We start with a solution of natron we prepared and use it to thoroughly rinse the body inside and out.
Hold the legs, please, so I can get a hand in here. I gotta pour in his bottle.
Is the sloshing
Where did all the
stuff?
water go? I don't know. Maybe it came out the neck.
It came out the neck. It came out the neck.
If this was a human, you can immediately see that this would require multiple people to do.
Yeah.
As we learned firsthand, mummification is not a lone operator kind of deal. It's done by a large team that scales based on the size of the animal you're working on. An ox, for example, would need a lot more people to maneuver than a small bird. After the saline natron rinse, the body was dried off and we prepared the next wash.
This is just for a chicken. When he says a lot more, I'm assuming it was probably an entire team of people at that point, because for pharaohs, especially the most extreme cases. And wait, Martin mentioned washing soda is the main part of detergents. Oh, really? So it's kind of like how Pepto-Bismol is basically just chalk in a suspended formula, and then some other things they throw in to make it not cheap.
In this case, white wine mulled with myrrh and cinnamon. We wanted to use date wine as that would have been more accurate, but we couldn't find any.
There's wines made from dates? If you haven't had a date before, one, I realize what I said, sorry about that. But also the fruit as well, they're very sweet. They're like self-candying, it seems, and they're really good. I did not know you could make a wine from them. And that sounds like almost pure sugar, and I kind of want to try it now.
And never had time to brew our own. We did, however, use the highest alcohol content wine we could find. Again, the body is...
highest alcohol? It'd be pure sugar, so it'd have the most... Because when it converts to alcohol, there would have been a lot of sugar content to convert to. Oh. So basically, sweet isopropyl. Oh shit, man.
Rinsed well and scrubbed inside and out, before being dumped out and emptied, then once again carefully dried. As you might imagine, this is not a dignified part of this process, and one where it's a little hard to keep one's composure.
That's the shot I'm looking for.
The last wash was actually done with an oil, in this case, cedar oil.
Really?
This immediately starts to make the skin look more golden, which the Egyptians would have appreciated, and it helps the body to smell much better. Especially if the corpse was a little bit old, this small treatment would go a long way. But also, cedar oil has strong antimicrobial properties, so it also acts sort of as a disinfectant. After it's
Oh,
been
I
properly
actually didn't know
anointed,
that.
the internal cavity was stuffed with linen bags filled with natron. These are simple to prepare by
Salt
just
bags.
making squares out of linen, putting some natron on top, and then tying it off with string. And these are incredibly common to find in mummification caches.
Oh.
Then the body was secured to various bits of wood so that it was basically in the position we want it to be once it's dried. If we don't do this now, the body is going to be way too stiff once it's
Because it would harden as it dries out, and then it's not going to be possible to move at all. Yeah. And Ori, you mentioned you've had date wine. It's highly something you would recommend. I might actually try that.
dry
That
to
actually sounds fun.
reposition, so it'll be stuck in whatever pose we bury it in.
Hmm.
Another interesting note is that the
Jennifer.
traditional drying period was 35 days in natron, followed by about a month of further post-processing treatments and air drying, though this all could vary. This is because at about 35 days, an average human body should be just dry enough that it can be still mostly repositioned, but dramatically lighter and easier to maneuver. Any more and it gets
bodies
too
are heavy,
crunchy
man.
and you risk breaking things. Though since we're doing such a small animal, our bird will be fully cooked by 30 days, so we have to do almost all of the positioning in advance. But with that, it was time to move her into the drying chamber. This box was specially made for this purpose, though the ancients would have likely just done this outside in tents. We wanted to have a ventilated box so that if it starts to stink really badly, as some of the papers mentioned, then we wouldn't be stuck in a disgusting lab for the whole month it was drying.
Oh, they're doing this inside. Oh, there's horror stories, and Mythbuster has done it, where if you leave an animal to rot in a hot vehicle for about a week, it makes the vehicle unusable and you have to just scrap the entire thing because the scent never goes away. If they're doing this in the place they work, this is one of those questions where it's like, okay, immediately after this, did they have to get a new place to have a lab? Because they make a mistake and this becomes a health hazard.
We also added wooden slats so that we could get a couple of inches worth of salt underneath the corpse rather than having it sit on the bare wood.
Oh.
And this is the same way they did it in ancient Egypt. If you
Really?
think about it, any liquid is going to want to seek the lowest point. So this salt will be doing a lot more of the absorption legwork, much more than the stuff on top. Once we had a nice bed of salt, the body was carefully positioned and then slowly buried. In total, we used between 50 and 60 pounds of natron for this tiny bird. A human would need anywhere from 300 to 700 pounds worth. Though in theory the salt could be reused and re-dried, though I cannot imagine how bad it would smell after a couple of uses. At this point, all we had to do was light up some incense and let it cook. We burned 3 kinds of incense every day we were at the lab. Myrrh in the morning, frankincense in the afternoon, and 1 ball of kiffy, the special incense we made, in the evening before.
How do they make it? What is it exactly made of? Also, I wonder if the incense they burn in the drying process has an effect on the flavor. Because it's a chicken, it's like, oh, this is curious, but just remembering people ate this as other people. It's like, yeah, cannibalism.
Before we left. Kiffy, or at least my version of the recipe, smells incredible.
Oh.
Like a fresh spring day with notes of sweet berries and herbs. And as it burns, it changes to a rich, woody notes.
Oh.
There's a bunch of channels on YouTube that have attempted making it, but most of them make wildly inaccurate substitutions, like using rose petals or pine nuts. Or some are just using bad translations of the recipe, as there's a few floating around online that come from ancient Greek writers rather than Egyptian sources.
And
However, the process of making
it should be pointed out, while the concept of history in general came from Herodotus, he lied a lot. He might have been the guy who it was named after, but you should never trust anything he wrote. So yeah, that's enough of a determinative statement there. Let's put it that way.
Making it is really long and complicated and has a really cool story behind it, and it just won't fit into this video. So instead, we've made a second video over on Nebula that you can watch right after this one. We go over
That
the
actually
recipe
sounds
for
pretty cool.
kiffy, all the ointments we'll be making today, as well as translations for all the hieroglyphs that you're going to see throughout the video.
Wait, they actually
and a
translated the
bunch of other
hieroglyphs.
Easter
Oh
eggs.
wow! Because Rosetta Stone
Eventually,
gave the
I want to
option.
make a
Yeah.
video dedicated solely to the production of kiffy, but I'm not 100% satisfied with my recipe yet because I'm not actually 100% sure if the hieroglyphs were translated correctly. In the only copies that I could find, some of the symbols are damaged or may have been copied down incorrectly back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
So the only way I'm going to know for
Would
sure
be
is to physically
unearthing another
go to
one.
Egypt and check the tombs and temples myself.
I mean, Mr. Beast got to do it. Wouldn't be the weirdest thing if he could pay them.
The most frustrating part, personally, is that the recipe is visible in a popular tourist spot. There's just no pictures of it. So once I take that trip,
So he wouldn't even need to make a big trip. He could actually just go there. How old is this video? It's a year old. I'm assuming one of the later videos was, we went.
I'll make that follow-up. For now, the Nebula video will include my current recipe for those that want to give it a go and see all of the other fun details that I mentioned. But we'll talk more about Nebula at the end of the video. Alright, back to our slowly desiccating corpse. If we'd been professional embalmers, as the thing dried, we may have noticed the smell and thought to do something about it sooner. But we ended up waiting for 15 days to change the inner natron bags. We weren't sure they needed to be changed at all, but by day 8, there was a noticeable stench of death, and by day 15, it was getting intolerable.
Oh yeah, that's. Oh.
To point out, scents like that, they might need a new office because those do not go away.
Okay. Yeah, that's where all the stink is.
This was also the point at which some part of our lizard brain started screaming, if we eat this, we will die. So our initial plan to make a second mummy out of a side of pork specifically to be eaten was thrown out the nearest window. Because I'm all for committing to the bit, but if there's one thing I've learned after watching the Ocean Gate wreck, it's that dying in an incredibly stupid way on the internet is a really bad idea. So we decided on an alternative that we think you'll find fair. Technically, people didn't usually eat the flesh of the mummies. I mean, they did, and they came up with all sorts of mental gymnastics to claim that it wasn't cannibalism, but generally, mummia specifically referred to the resinous coating. And for the first time in thousands of years, we have loads of the same resins.
We do?
That just happen to be fresh. So we don't actually need to scrape them off a mummy to taste it. So at the end of the video, you'll get to see that chaos.
Oh, so they're testing their own version of the resin that they don't actually have to put on the dead bird. Oh, thank God. I was actually a little afraid of that at this point because, yeah, but at the same time...
However, before we move on, look at how dark the skin already looks. Before the groups I mentioned earlier attempted to make a mummy, people didn't know if they get their distinct colors from the fact that they're very old or from the process. But every study that's been done, and I mean you can see the same here, shows that the process is what makes the color. And this was something that we noticed multiple times throughout this experiment. It seems a lot of why mummies look like that comes from the process, not their age. They look like this even brand new. After reburial and natron, we continued lighting incense and waiting for another 15 days, by which time the stank had...
That doesn't count as lighting the incense. That's just assaulting the incense. They got an actual blowtorch to light it, man? What the hell?
Had largely subsided. But before we unearthed it again, we prepared all of the various ointments with the exception of the glue, which was prepared only on the final day when we wrapped the mummy, which is coming up later. Speaking of the ointments and resins, how did we actually figure out a recipe that's been lost for thousands of years? Literally only a year or so ago, a brand new find of a mummification workshop at the necropolis in Saqqara turned up a number of pots that not only had residue of the balms and ointments still in them, but the pots were labeled with what they contained. So using a technique called mass spectrometry, the group analyzed the residue and just published their analysis of what compounds could still be found and what sort of ingredients must have been used for each type of mixture.
I had not heard about this. I'm moderately obsessed with this kind of stuff. Not to the extent of some people, but that's actually kind of genius.
We, of course, were thrilled when we saw this, as we happened to be looking into mummification ointment recipes right when the study was published.
This video came out a year ago. They said it came out a year before that. So they had been working on this and probably already starting up to plan it out 2 years ago at this point. This is a very long production time for this thing.
The information from that paper and then compared it to several others that took samples off of actual mummies and ran the same tests. From both of these, I was able to put together an ingredient list, and the labels of the pots in Saqqara also specified what each mixture was supposed to be used for. The mass spec data also shows how common each ingredient is in the mixture.
And if you know how common it is and how much is there, then you can figure out what the mixture itself would be, working backwards. Dude.
When you adjust for how volatile each ingredient was to account for the fact that really smelly stuff also evaporates away more quickly, you end up with a recipe that is pretty close and should work. Also, something that is very, very clear from the mass spec data is that just like how everyone has their own family recipes, so too did each embalmer, and the actual recipe wasn't something that was necessarily set in stone.
Which also means that being wrong isn't the biggest issue, because as long as you're right enough, it's probably close to what they would have done for various different people. Okay.
There was a huge amount of variation, especially when you look at the composition of mummies from different periods. It would be made from
So it'd be kind of like concrete. You think it's one thing, but actually there's a lot of different recipes of what they put into it. And there's various places where it might be a red concrete, a brown concrete, a green concrete, or more stone that just happens to be held together. That's actually a thing. It's mostly based on the materials you have on hand to get it cheaper. Sometimes you buy a local, sometimes you buy cement mixes. There's a lot of variation to it. It's not one size fits all. It's one size with a lot of everyone chooses what size it is.
From a selection of ingredients, a little bit a la carte, and adjusted based on how much you were paying.
Yeah. Also, ooh, King Dragon, thank you for joining the membership for 9 months at the Go Team Audit EVA level. And will I do another Pancreas No Work video? Oh, can you do the Halo Hammer video where he takes a Halo fan fiction and puts it into Warhammer 40k? That sounds kind of awesome, and I very well might. Always meant to do more of his stuff, just never got around to it.
Remember, everyone was mummified, so the recipe was highly dependent on class, just as much as it was on time period. The ingredients
So are they going to try and go with the highest class of mummification resin then? Because they're giving it to the Pharaoh chicken? Or are they going with what most people would have because of that? Huh. I'm also showing where the different things would come from. And since some of this would come from much lower, yeah. There was a standard and thriving trade between Egypt and a lot of other locations at this time period. And they have found that not the Incense, what's the name of the road? Not Jade Road. But trade with China and Asia was already well established at this point. Granted, how established, that does vary on the source and whatnot. There's a lot of information we've only found out within like the last decade to indicate it was much more than we thought. It might not be random caravans, but an actual full-on Silk Road. It wouldn't be the Silk Road this time period. That came much later, but it would be the predecessor to what the Silk Road became and was based more on, I think, incense. Could be wrong.
for the ointments were expensive and had to be shipped in from literally all over the world, so luxuries like high-quality embalming came at a steep price. As such, we tried to emulate recipes that might have been used on someone rather wealthy or on one of the sacred animals. That way we could explore the whole gamut of ancient smells. We made 5 different mixtures,
for
4
different
ointments
levels of
and 1
affluence.
glue. The first 3 ointments come from Sakara research and were noted as bandage treatment, skin treatment, and face treatment. The cedar oil wash we did at the beginning of the process also came from the same research and a pot labeled to wash. The last ointment, called Majet, is one of the sacred anointing oils, and it's used for the top of the head, palms, and feet. They're all made of similar ingredients, and the base for all of them is tallow. The Egyptians would have used ox tallow, but I couldn't find any, so I just went with beef. But you can actually tell specifically that the animal fat comes from a ruminant animal just from the mass spec data, which I thought was really cool. To the tallow,
ruminated, for stomach. Yeah, that would do it.
Various amounts of different resins and oils are added. These include ones from the Philippines called alemi, pine resin from a specific species that grows near Egypt called Aleppo pine.
Wait. The Philippines. Damn. I mean, I guess it's, if China's in there, they had naval presence. Or what would become China, or had bits of China at that time period. So yeah, that is really all over the world.
Resin, mastic gum from pistachia trees in Greece, as well as cedar and juniper oil. I also used moringa oil as a neutral thinner for some of the recipes, and also some called for beeswax. Each of the solid ingredients were ground in a mortar and pestle to help speed up how quickly they dissolve, as otherwise it can take a really long time. In order to heat and melt everything, we created a sort of ye old Bunsen burner and stand using an oil lamp and an upturned terracotta pot.
Hey, it works.
All things Egyptians definitely could have made, though we don't know if this is how they heated the mixtures. But this is a reasonable choice and it gives fine control at low effort. We also use these cute little terracotta cups as our brewing vessels, so it's only stuff that they would have had access to. As we worked, we would regularly consult.
So it's not even that they're just recreating the actual mixtures themselves, but they're doing a good job to just copy over how it could have been done. Wooden spoons, possible. Terracotta and just clay work in general, yeah. If anything, the oil might be the biggest option that'd be off.
The papyrus scroll we prepared with the recipes to make sure that things were being measured out correctly. Generally, we would add the tallow first and then the various resins and oils, and then just heat and mix everything until it was combined. The differences between the treatments are as follows. The skin treatment is much runnier, as we want it to soak into the skin to return some suppleness and motion to the body so it can be finally positioned without cracking. The face ointment is more gelled and includes beeswax to give it a more protective layer to the face. And the bandage treatment also includes some wax, but is much richer in aromatic oils and was mixed
This legitimately looks like something that people would use right now.
to be very firm at room temperature. After all, we don't want a mummy to look soggy, it should be nice and solid. Finally, the Majat, the holy oil, is more focused on smell. It contains cinnamon, myrrh, and pine resin along with cedar and juniper oil, but it also contains a plant called madder, which acts as a rich red dye. This is why this mixture was also used as a makeup in more daily or religious life outside of mummification. All of the leftovers from this process, as well as large amounts of myrrh, cinnamon, and frankincense, were ground up and mixed into sawdust. This will be stuffed into the body cavity to prevent it from collapsing, and it goes a long way to hide any remaining smell emanating from the putrefied internals.
Because it absorbs the extra moisture if there's anything left at this point.
With all the ointments and other materials prepared, it was time to unearth the body. This time, very little had changed, as the body had already been fairly dry by day 15. We then...
That is... It's basically jerky at this point. Holy shit, man. I wonder if they went full salt instead of just the bags and maybe had an upright position. Would that change it?
Spent the better part
So
of
it would
an
drain
hour
straight
or two
down.
carefully cleaning the natron off of and out of the body. This meant chipping off the larger pieces, as well as using brushes, scoops, and pokey tools to get off as much as possible. It was slow work, but in the end, we were left with a thing that already looked a whole lot like a mummy, but its transformation was only just beginning. Now it's time to oil it. We started with the Majat, oiling first the comb at the top of the head, and then the tips of the wings, and finally the feet. Though even anointed in holy oil, I don't think these gnarly gangle toes are going to be breaking any records on wiki feet anytime soon.
I keep hearing people make jokes about that place. And for the sake of my, let's go with stomach, I'm going to pretend it's only a joke. Please, no one in the comments tell me otherwise, because I don't want to live in that world, and I'm not going to acknowledge anyone who tells me, oh, yeah, no, the bird's on there. They're doing great. I don't want to know. I really don't. I really don't.
Next up, it was time for a little facial for our queen. In humans, the eyes typically would have been removed and replaced with fakes, but our bird actually kept theirs intact, and so it just didn't seem necessary.
Because
After
they probably
their
have
facial,
glass
it was time for the
marble
full
ones.
body treatment. The skin treatment was melted first because we really wanted to soak in. But at this point, something interesting happened. As we coated more of the body, the smell started to quickly disappear and be replaced by the pleasant smell of the ointment. And it started to look more and more like a nice roast Peking duck, which was a weird bit of mental dissonance, especially with the interesting bouquet of smells in the room at the time. But
What
from this
other
point
smells
on,
would be
it
in the
only
room?
began to smell better and better as more of the process was completed. Right after applying the final oil, it started to smell so nice that you could easily forget you were handling a corpse. Once everything was well oiled, we used some rope to do a final bit of positioning to the body. We knew at this point how wide it could be to still fit into the sarcophagus, and its knees needed to come in a fair bit. When it was ready, we brought it back upstairs and laid it on some linen on the pile of natron. And of course, lit some more incense. This way, the body will have time to sit and absorb the oil in a nice dry environment and be further smoked and infused by the incense.
So they're literally smoke drying out the mummy. I guess that makes sense. I just never actually thought that would be part of it, but yeah, they're literally smoking it. That means the smoker that you put all that food through is technically a part of the mummification process that we just kept for other means. I know the joke and why this video is weird is that this is like, hey, we're going to eat the mummy. And there's like, no, you don't do that. Don't do that. It's a person. But on the other hand, the more they're talking about this, the more this seems less like a religious matter and more like actual cooking. And it's not even just when they're talking about the dissonance of it looks like Peking duck and it's kind of fucked up, but also there's an entire bit of this where I'm just feeling like, why did they mummify certain animals? Because I'm pretty sure I would not be surprised if we find out later that some of the animals were probably cooked in the same way they were mummified. And it does sound like cooking techniques to a disturbing degree. I don't know how to deal with this. Yeah. Also, Quantum, we have a Monday stream target now? Yep. If we happen to hit it, I will do that one. I did not limit it to just reactions. So if someone can get us to the goal and you guys want me to play a certain game that I normally would avoid like the plague, that did win. We'll find out what happens.
Now, speaking of the sarcophagus, this is another area where a ridiculous amount of work was put in. Did we need to do this?
Nope.
No. Would it have affected the taste in any way? Also, no. But if we're going to have a...
Would it, though? I mean, external storage does have an effect. It's why if you have like a bunch of cedar wood to store something when you're smoking it long term, there is a difference between that and a different wood because of how it interacts with the environment. Now, I mean, how much is depending on your palate, but it's not entirely negligible. It's just close to negligible.
A mummy around the office, it needs a proper case. The sarcophagus base was carved from wood by hand by my awesome dad. His name is Danny, and he is, amongst many other things, an award-winning wood sculptor in his spare time.
Oh,
and
damn.
was thrilled when I asked him to make the sarcophagus for this project, but probably not as thrilled as I was when he...
I would love to hear about that conversation where it's like, hey, Dad, I need a sarcophagus for a chicken. You know where I can do that? That is definitely a mood I wish they had got on camera. Martin, you want me to do Ultra Kill and Noida? Hey, if that's what wins, I'd actually be okay with trying Noida. I would probably then rage out within 5 minutes after dying 7 times. But I would do it if that's what wins.
Came to the lab to deliver it after weeks of work.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Oh,
I'm so
my
excited.
God.
I feel like I'm presenting.
Wow, they have the same hair.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Also, nice beard, dude. Nice. It does look awesome. Oh, it's carved in sections.
The plastic. Yeah, all right.
Like that. You just need to support your hair a little bit.
The chicken fits.
He fits in there great. What was I struggling about? Ta-da!
Perfect.
Perfect.
I'm just going to throw it out there. This guy looks like someone who has already mummified a chicken prior to this. I mean, can you imagine if a guy with long hair and glasses and a beard that they haven't really kept up with and it's only slightly shaved would wear a lot of black and would do that? I mean, that is... Oh, man. That would be weird. I have not mummified a chicken. Mostly because that would be involving some type of cooking, apparently, and I can't do that to save my life. Yeah.
Though even in its beautiful state, it is not even close to finished, because we wanted to go the full mile. So first off, I spent the better part of 3
They actually
days
got gold
carefully
leaf?
gilding it. We're
They're actually using gold leaf for this?
using fake gold for this,
Oh, it's
which
fake,
has a
okay.
very different texture than real gold,
But-
but looks basically the same in the
Yeah.
end. Though none of us are professional gilders, so at times it did have a little bit of an Easter chocolate bunny look.
Yeah. I mean, I probably would have just gone gold spray paint. It actually works pretty well.
Once it was fully gilded, we did the first of several coats of varnish to protect the brass so it doesn't tarnish.
Oh, shit. I actually have the same varnish at home. It works great on models that you're not going to paint anymore. Seals them in really well. And then reactivates anything that it reactivates easily.
None of this is period accurate, but it was a lot of fun. And then with one very shiny chicken box in hand, it was time to paint it. I ended up doing a lot
would
of this
love to
off
hear
camera
this.
because it was just so many days of work, but I tried to incorporate as many elements from real
Wait, was he... He was literally painting by the lines.
this off camera because it was just so many days of work, but I tried to incorporate as many elements from real
His freehand is amazing. I cannot do that. That is actually
sarcophagi
impressive.
as possible. Specifically, all the writing on the outside of the sarcophagus is usually a mix of two things: spells and the story of the person inside's life. I don't know how this chicken lived, so I went with 100% spells. And for that, I picked up several copies of the Book of the Dead and picked ones that tended to make sense. But that does mean that 100% of the writing on the coffin is readable, though we did sneak a few Easter eggs into it, which you can either find by translating it yourself or by watching the Nebula video.
How many people in the comments actually translated this? Imagine year 23, Osiris. He's so it's amazing. Okay, I don't think there's anyone here who translated it, but I would love to see if there's actually someone who has a translation of all of it, just to see what the hell it
Speaking of
says.
spells, though,
Oh
saying
my
the
God.
Book of the Dead isn't really an accurate representation of what the Book of the Dead really was, because importantly, it wasn't a book. It started as a loose collection of spells that would have been inscribed onto the sarcophagus and the walls of the tomb, or onto the many different amulets that might have been made. Over time, the spells started being inscribed onto the bandages of the mummy, and this is
Oh, really? So the Book of the Dead was actually the bandages themselves at one point. So you're literally wearing the book. Huh. Not initially, but that's kind of a cool way to interpret it.
actually where we get a lot of the early versions of the book from.
And
And
why
the
I thought it
spells
was a
often are
book.
more short stories about a particular god than they are spells in any sort of Harry Potter sense.
You're saying it wrong. It's Leviosa, not Leviosa.
You do it then if you're so clever.
But the point is, not only would the bodies be carefully preserved,
wrote
they would
onto it, yeah.
literally be wrapped in an entire spellbook. Later, the tradition shifted to papyrus scrolls as they were easier to prepare in advance of somebody dying. For example, here's a page we prepared depicting the soul of Hennifer meeting the council of gods that would judge her fate. And lower down...
They actually just drew the chicken. They put the chicken head up. Oh, wow. Yeah, they actually have the chicken head being walked through by Anubis.
We see her heart is being weighed against a feather by Anubis. If she passed the test, she would be ushered into the afterlife and would get a chance to meet Big Daddy Osiris himself. If she fails, she'd be condemned to oblivion, and her soul would be eaten by the monster Ammit. The various spells of the Book of the Dead are meant to help the dead pass this and many of the other tests on their journey to the afterlife. So having a copy either literally wrapped around you, or at least on hand in your tomb, was supposed to be like keeping the instruction manual with you so you don't mess it up. To keep in that spirit, we spent about an hour inscribing as many of the bandages as we could with various spells taken from the Book of the Dead.
Damn.
The bandages were made from pieces of linen that were torn to the right size. For many mummies,
They
the bed
sized
sheets of
them?
the person who died were torn to produce the bandages for the dead.
Oh.
But for those more well-off, pieces of linen of the exact correct width were
So for most people, they just tore up their deathbed sheets. That's honestly kind of morbid, realizing that whatever you die in, like what you're sleeping in, is what you're going to spend eternity in. Like, that thought process is kind of fucked up. But I guess it's not the
directly
weirdest one.
manufactured as to not have a frayed edge. The last thing to do before we wrap our bird is to prepare the glue. We chose to do this on the day of because we didn't know how the glue would behave when it was cooled and heated in the ceramic pot. But in hindsight, this probably could have been done in advance without issue. This recipe is sort of the inverse of the others we made. Lots of sticky resin with very little fat. In this case, we used mastic gum, damar resin, Aleppo pine resin, as well as small amounts of myrrh, cinnamon, and cedar and juniper oil. The fat that we
I just
do
don't know
add
what it
is
smells
mainly
like.
to act as a solvent and will also dramatically lower
Morbid
the
or
melting
cozy,
point
Kieran?
so that it
Oh,
doesn't
God.
get smoky. It also helps to wet all of the resin
Depends how much
powders
you like
and
your
help them
sheets.
melt faster. Once everything was melted together, we were ready to get to work as this stuff needs to be used hot. Something that had been noticed in mummies is that the tissue on the outside often looks slightly cooked, and this is almost certainly why. Even with gloves, we got a little burned doing this, and probably could have let it cool down a fair bit without impacting the process. But if you were doing
So
a
it's
whole person, you
burning
needed
them
to be
because they
fairly
need it.
hot to last through the whole process. We used a homemade brush made of bundled linen cords to apply the glue to the body. Then we carefully glued down the inscribed bandages, starting from the head and working our way down. This was a fairly slow and methodical process, and we quickly figured out that once a bandage is down, you can just paint the glue onto the bottom of the bandages to instantly turn it into ye olde duct tape. Once half the bird was covered, we stuffed our prepared sawdust
Yeah, because a bandage with glue on one side would essentially be Egyptian duct tape. So one of the oldest and most traditional ways to mummify a body was essentially cook them and duct tape it shut. I honestly can't tell if this is more or less advanced. And I'm not talking about us or them, and it kind of scares me. I'm not sure which one I'm talking about. Okay.
into the inner cavity as tightly as possible, and then made a little diaper with 3 pieces of well-glued cloth to hold it down.
Chicken diaper.
Then the wrapping continued until we had run out of inscribed bandages. The whole time, the bird was getting encased in more and more resin and bandages until it was essentially an airtight resin linen bird composite.
Would they have enough for the feet
At
as well?
this point, it was time for some amulets. Normally, mummies would be filled with amulets. Here's all the ones found in a single mummy, for example. But we stuck with a nice round 3. First, a Jed pillar, or the Pillar of Osiris, which we glued to the throat and covered in a few wraps of linen. Then we followed this with an Eye of Horus, and finally a heart scarab. Many of these would often be inscribed with spells on a human mummy, but they would have been much larger and have more space for those spells. With all the amulets wrapped in, we are into the final stages. We continued adding layers of linen by just tying new pieces to the end of the last wrapping and wrapping until we had 8 to 12 layers total on the whole bird. Then we can add a final shroud to encase everything. This was tied on very tightly with several more strips of cloth, and at this point the mummy is mostly complete. All that's left is the top coat. Now, keep in mind, this is the most speculative part of this, as we don't have any better evidence that this part was done this way.
Oh, so they're actually not sure what turning it from just a sheet to wrap it into a preserved casing and hardening it by the glue, I'm assuming. I am kind of curious, though, why the way they've been applying it is taking the linen and dabbing it into a circle and then taking the circular end of it and using that as a brush. Is that specifically done because that's how they believe it's done, or is that just what they had on hand? They didn't want to buy brushes themselves. Would they have even had brushes in Egypt? I don't actually know why.
But this is how we
Unless
interpret
they said
the
I
use
missed
of
it.
the ointment labeled bandage treatment. We were torn on if that meant the bandages should be pre-soaked or if this was applied at the end. But based on ancient descriptions of pouring ointments and perfumes on the final mummy, we think this is what they meant. We heated the mixture until it was molten, so that way it'll soak into the linen when we apply it.
And there's already things bleeding
This batch
through.
has extra of the cedar oil in it, as this will be the layer most exposed to air and liable to rot. So the antimicrobial and antifungal nature of the resins and cedar oil will help prevent that.
Did not know
And
cedar
because
was
this is based on
antimicrobial.
tallow and wax, once it's
Brushes are a
cooled,
very
it'll
old
seal
tool?
the entire mummy in a layer of nice-smelling lipids that'll make the inner mummy truly airtight. A fun bonus we weren't expecting was that the second the oil hit the linen, it immediately looked pretty much the exact color of ancient mummies.
Yeah.
So once again, the color of mummies really does seem to come from the process. And the fact that they look the same, brand new, or thousands of years old, just goes to show how successful the process was at preservation. All that was
kept
left
them the
now
same.
was some final ornamentation. First, we included an inscribed ceremonial obsidian knife. I also spent a couple of days making this beautiful chicken-sized Wesek necklace based on examples in various museums.
They made a chicken necklace. I'm sorry. Just as an aside, he made a necklace for the dead chicken they're mummifying. The chicken has a knife. Why do I have a feeling someone's going to see this and make this a mod for a Goose Game at this point?
And that's all there is to making a mummy. It only took thousands of dollars and months of painstaking and often physically exhausting work. And there was so much more we didn't cover that got cut for time, as this video is already gigantic.
Yeah.
Also, to commemorate this insane project, we're doing something a little special.
Are they
You've
selling
seen
them?
the set of mummy assembly
Oh God, they actually
instructions
are,
we've
aren't they?
shown throughout the video. They're screen printed on actual papyrus from
Oh.
the only remaining papyrus farm in Egypt. And for only the next 2 weeks, you can buy one for yourself in one of 3 amazing colors, black, red, or blue. If you want one, just follow the link in the description. This may be the only time these are ever available, but we will produce as many as are ordered in the next 2 weeks.
I'm legitimately wondering if there is a museum that bought one of these, because it's oddly enough a very good description of exactly how to do what they've been researching. It's kind of like a dummy's guide for exactly what they want to teach someone getting into it.
We're trying to have them made and shipped before Christmas, but if the number of orders we get is huge, it may take a little bit longer. We're having them screen printed by an awesome local artist, and all are made by hand. So if you'd like one and want to
printing is
support the
crazy,
show,
man.
there's a link below.
I've done it once.
But don't
It was
delay,
fun.
as the sale closes on midnight 2 weeks after this video is released. And last but not least, before we get to the tasting, let's finally talk
I forgot
about
they're gonna eat it.
Nebula. Nebula is the amazing creator-owned streaming platform that lets you watch videos First mummy goodness.
Go skip through that.
All right, let's get to the part you all came here to see.
Oh, it's the different treatments they have in jars now.
It's tasting time. Now, we're not about to just go licking a jar of ointment. Traditionally, it would have been given as a tincture, so we picked up a bunch of jars, shot glasses, and a big bottle of vodka. We put a small scoop of each of the ointments.
So it's not even that they're eating the mummy, thank God for that. It's that they're probably cleaning it because alcohol content in vodka is probably high enough to at least make it somewhat safer. And they're drinking the mummy powders or the mummy juices. I'm pretty sure my wife is judging me for everything I'm saying right now, and I can't say she's wrong. She's just in the background going, yeah. Oh my God. So they're going to get drunk while drinking mummy juice. When Mama drinks juice, nobody's happy.
Into about 150 mils of vodka
You get that.
and gave it a good shake.
Oh,
the
God.
plan was to make and taste 5 tinctures made with the different mixtures, and then at the end, a combination of all of them as our synthetic Mummy Vera for
That
the
actually
ultimate
looks
cursed
distur-
cocktail.
Oh,
So as
God,
to not
that
get
is-
poisoned should any of this not be edible. The plan is to take a sip and then immediately spit it out. But with all of our tinctures poured, there was only one thing left to do.
We've managed to talk our way
To this point.
to this point. Oh, this is the like, we're like, haha, wouldn't it be so funny? Well, I wonder what a mummy tastes like.
They're actually doing it. They're actually doing it. Ori, back just in time for the tasting. Yeah. This is the video you guys want, and now we're getting to watch them drink a mummy. I'm doing this. We're actually
And then we
checking this
spent
out.
thousands of dollars making one, and here we are.
Mummy juice.
And now we have to actually taste it, and oh God, there's chunks in.
You know, I wasn't actually looking at the comments, but there's probably someone in there asking for the recipe so they can do it themselves because, chunky sounds like it might be a good idea. I wasn't looking for that when I went down through the comments before. I'm not going to look again in case I find it.
This. Do we start with?
Skin treatment?
Do we just? Yeah. What do we think? Do
Yeah,
we
let's
just
go down the line.
Yeah. Don't try this at home, kids.
Bottoms up. Bottoms up.
Who's going to throw up first?
Oh, it's so much worse than I thought.
What does
Jesus,
it taste
it just gets worse. Oh,
Mummia.
Spicy, actually.
I know. Why is it spicy?
Cinnamon has a spicy component.
So this one is, what is this one?
This one is face
Treatment. All right. This is like drinking mascara.
Honestly, this last guy over here, he's not exactly into it, but he's holding it better than the rest. I'm assuming the vodka was definitely a good option. And Bill Siphon? Or yeah, Bill? Everyone in the chat is an evil genius for recommending this? Yeah. Thankfully, I might be able to get away with not having to play any rage game that you guys demand, because I might be able to avoid this one. I might be safe.
It's like medicine.
Yeah.
Oh, it's worse. Oh, it gets worse.
No, the first one was worse.
Yep, first one was worse.
Oh, they didn't age it a few thousand years?
Magenta
True.
time, boys.
So this
True,
is the cedar.
true.
Not the cedar.
This is
but
the cinnamon one. This one's gonna be weird. To our health.
Help!
After this, they were then found in a ditch. Drunk.
All right.
Here we go. Oh, that one sneaks up on you.
I'm not sure if anyone else noticed it, but there's actually like a little blur over right here. I'm not sure if it's the camera itself that's blurred or if something is interacting in this.
Yeah.
Ginger ale. God. Oh, they had to double cleanse. Also, I'm just being told, like, right now, this guy over here, like the one right above my hand, this guy, he's either got an iron stomach or he's had some truly gnarly shit in his life. And this is just bad as opposed to everyone else going, kill me.
That one was not good.
I'm actually impressed and terrified.
No, we knew it was going to be bad. It was not good. It was not good.
People did this and they paid money for it.
I thought it wasn't going to be bad, and then it just gets so bad so
It
fast.
ramps up.
Blurs the shirt
At
image?
the beginning, you're just
Maybe.
like, oh,
You're like, oh, this one's mild.
Oh no, oh no.
Like, you just feel like your entire body wants you to leave your entire body.
It's
So
like
far,
it's
face
meant for dead
treatment
people.
Is the least offensive of the three
Yeah.
that we've tried. Which, I mean, it's
This-
pretty bad. So that's saying something.
Right, and like the skin treatment then is worse, but Magenta is basically skin treatment
with
Plus
more.
extra bullshit, yeah. This one's got pine in it.
Yeah.
The other ones don't. Oh, this one's gonna be piney.
We're gonna bite it. Aleppo piney. Bottoms up.
Bandage treatment. Oh, he kind of liked it.
I mean,
That one was fine.
I've had worse tasting shots
Yeah. Actually,
at the bar.
That was actually fine. It's not good.
No, but I've had worse at the bar.
I feel like
I'm actually a little terrified of what bar they're going to. If the random mummy stuff tastes better. Wait, Hassan. They've accidentally aged alcohol using ultrasonic cleaner. I guess that's one way to get the aged effect of the wines, but anything alcoholic in an ultrasonic cleaner is actually dangerous because given enough time, ultrasonic heats up liquids. And most alcohols are flammable. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons, even though I have an ultrasonic cleaner for some of my 3D models and I have resin that is cured in alcohol, I try not to use them together in any long periods of time, more than a few minutes, because it could, blow up, and I would like to avoid that.
I feel like after the Majet, anything was gonna be better.
not counter chickens. We still have the
Oh no.
We got glue, and then
He actually said don't count the chickens because it's literally because they're literally doing the stuff they used on the chicken.
The Mummia. Mummia Vera.
God, that's honestly, I'm terrified.
They
of
played
that
do
one.
on rat brain
Oh, my
cells.
breath smells
I'm
of
gonna
mummy.
ignore everything you just said, Martin. Glue. Glue shots. Glue for everyone. Oh, that's.
Oh,
Oh god, that came back up.
Oh god, this is literally the worst.
So you know how we say don't huff glue?
Don't drink it either.
Don't drink it.
So I apparently am a sympathetic when it comes to my ability to keep my stomach down because I'm watching this, and as they're getting more and more bad taste out of this, all I'm thinking is, oh. And Martin said these guys are friends with Nile Red. Yeah, I'm not even surprised about that one. That's the level of insanity I kind of expect. And they made chicken soup with chemicals. All the YouTube mad scientists know each other, according to Bill Arson in the chat, and I'm terrified now because there's going to be some collabs. Oh god.
Don't drink glue. Don't drink glue. We're professionals.
Yeah.
You have a massive
And if they
degree.
drink enough of it, they won't be anymore.
Oh, yours has a chunky in it. Oh, they all do.
Yeah, this
Oh,
one's...
delicious. Okay, just avoid the chunkies.
That's not making it
the
better.
chunkies.
Oh god, that's not making it better.
Chunkies.
No. Oh, gotta throw up watching this.
Wait,
This
I
is
gotta-
the mummy of Vera. Oh god, they're all reacting to it. It's literally the worst one so far. Like, just give him the bottle of the freaking like whiskey or something stronger.
Don't do this.
No.
Don't do this. This is not.
I know they're using vodka. They should go stronger, full on whiskey, like a really full body, heavy taste, like the kind that beats you in the face with it. Because I think at that point the palate cleansing effect might be worth it.
No.
They did this for 700 years.
That.
I can't believe it took them 700 years to figure out that this was a bad idea.
Oh, yeah.
What does mummy taste like? Bad. Don't eat mummy.
No.
Don't eat mummy.
No.
Don't do it. It's
No.
bad. It's bad. It's bad. Don't eat mummy.
Oh my god.
Okay, fuck this noise. Let's get lunch.
Yep. Oh.
And maybe like an industrial scrubber for my tongue.
I'm being told in the chat that Everclear would make this better. This is probably one of the few times where I think that's not even a joke. And I can agree with them that Everclear would probably be a nice change of pace. At that point, it would only burn, specifically your tongue ability to taste things, and that would be the upside. Oh God. We have seen some things today. And they are very real. I'm not on the verge of throwing up, but I can also tell that if the next video is anything like this one, it would be a thing, and it will happen because Which idiot is going to buy the mummified chicken, though, because they want to actually eat it? Having eaten all those things, there's probably someone in there going, maybe we should. But I'm going to take a wild guess and say, no, they shouldn't, because that is probably one of the you gonna die things. Lori, KFC, anyone? If that's a joke, actually, that would be the edge. Oh, God. I've been drinking this entire time, and I'm feeling it fighting to come back up thinking about KFC right now. Oh, yeah, we're not having chicken today later. Oh, God. Yeah, and just people talking about the Lori Ipsum Doe set in there. Pain itself teaches. As a place where text newspaper, and Hassan mentioning, sometimes pain itself teaches. All I can say is they did this for 700 years. Pain did not teach. It was ignored. It was a terrible teacher. It was lax and took the day off. Ugh. Oh, God. This isn't the same level as the Made in Abyss videos for how much I want to throw up. But also, this involves people having actually done it. So it's that the more I think about it, the more I think I'll get sick later on today. And it's not going to get better. It really isn't. Yeah, so for everyone else, there's a bunch of mad scientists we just checked out. Hit up their stuff. Never mention to me again, because I will probably throw up on my keyboard. I would rather not have to clean it out again. So do that. It's awesome. They're great. I would love to see other things they've done, but just never think about this video again in my life, because good for Hennifer going through the full process, but goddamn, man. Yeah, I was not ready. I was not ready. Oh, God. Yeah. I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.